Commander. General? No, specific. It's a fatalis. A what? A fatalis, the most dangerous creature known to the guild. Do you know what this means? It's time for a siege! Well, no, not quite, but almost. So, there'll be something there that I know you love. Popcorn? Okay, I give up. Ladies, gentlemen, and monsters of all ages, welcome back one and all to this gorgeous game we call life, within which there is an actual series of video games called Monster Hunter, in which you hunt monsters. You all already know this. In fact, you all know a lot. So why would I use my own opinions to talk about a topic when I could use all of yours, collectively, on a topic that is slightly relevant? Honestly, I'm still unsure if we count this new Fatalis as a siege fight. He's one of those ones on the edge of the category. That said, today it is time for a dissection of the official community-generated list of the top 5 siege monsters in Monster Hunter. Now, this one is a little bit more relaxed than normal, as there are only a few actual siege monsters in the game series, only a few real choices, but it gives us more of an accurate ranking between the available options so we can really see where people's feelings lie on the matter.
How about next week?
Well, I was thinking next week, now that we've experienced the difficulty that is the god of all monsters himself, we could try a little bit of an expedition into the topic of which monster is the hardest. So, if you want to take part in the voting for that list, the top 5 hardest monsters in all of Monster Hunter, just scroll down to find yourself the link to the poll in the description of this very video. And if you do vote, make sure to leave a comment on this video as to why you voted the way that you did, and you may even see yourself in the video next week. Getting into the core of the experience then, we'll be going over the list itself of the top 5 siege monsters in all of Monster Hunter, followed by a little bit of graphical analysis on the experiment as a whole. So without further ado, let's begin with
number 5, with 4.59% of the votes.
The stages of the game will also be based on famous battles which actually took place in ancient Japan. So here's this giant enemy crab.
Shen Gaoren.
Shen Gaoren is peak siege monster for me. Its fight win in the fortress was super fun, because you had to plan its leg staggers in order to block its attacks on the fortress, turning it into a more strategic fight than all the other siege monsters. Also, since it doesn't have attacks that do not deal damage to the fortress, it actually gives the urge to block it because it's the only one that is genuinely trying to destroy the fortress. Also, it's a big crab, and its gunner armor is inspired on a dog.
This is exactly the type of passionate comment I love when I'm making these, especially for a monster like Shen Gaoren, who I have never actually fought personally. This type of insight into the fight really helps me appreciate the intricacy of the quest, even though the monster's personal animations were limited by the technology of the game at hand. Personally, I love him just as a concept because he's a giant terrifying spider crab with an acid cannon on his back, out to cause as much chaos as physically possible. But now that I know just how much his fight was based on the objectives of protecting the fortress, it makes me respect the whole idea around him even more. He's not just a giant crab for the sake of a giant crab. He's a giant crab built with siege weaponry in his biology that he uses to actively attempt to destroy forts and castles. Like, sure, most of his attacks can also hit the hunter, but you are absolutely not his main concern at any point, really, and that just makes the aura around him feel that much cooler to me. You are merely a small fry to Shen Gaoren, for he is in search of a larger fish, a fish named Fort.
Number 4, with 5.74% of the votes.
Why are you walking so slowly?
Lao Shan Lung.
I really like Lao Shanglung aka Grandpa Rathalos, mainly because it's the first monster you could properly mount. It was an absolute experience, and the knowledge that it's rushed through the bases because it was fleeing from a Fabulous is amazing to me.
That's a really cool reason, actually. Yeah, I do love that you can just jump down onto his back and bomb the hell out of him. That's a super neat mechanic, and I even loved doing it when I experienced it in Generations Ultimate, even though I had done things like standing on Zora Magdaros in the New World already. There's just something so satisfying about walking around on the back of a living creature that you're fighting. I don't know exactly what it is. I do agree that the lore of him being so adamant about going through the fort was to escape Fatalis, though that really adds a lot to the experience of the fight after the fact. This isn't necessarily a monster fighting in the comfort of its habitat with its own advantages, trying to rip your head off by any means. It is a creature fleeing to the best of its ability, and you just happen to be in its way.
I voted for Lao Shanlung. It has no real gimmicks, no instant kills, nothing. He's just a big lizard to beat the snot out of. Siege monsters usually aren't liked and Lao is arguably the least offensive of the bunch. The Demolisher is very satisfying though.
Well, yeah, you're right. He's the least offensive, but he's also arguably the least offensive. You know, he doesn't really fight back much, so much as he just trudges forward, looking at you like flies on his windshield. One interesting tidbit is that it's confirmed that Lao Shan Lung is actually a close relative of Zora Magdaros.
Number 3 with 16.6% of the votes.
I love gold!
Kulve Taroth.
I voted for Kulve Taroth. I know the RNG weapons aren't very well liked in the community, but I did actually enjoy them. But I also liked how her fight progressed, moving from one area to the next till a final area for a final stand to either break her horns or slay her depending on the quest rank.
See, Kulve is a super interesting one to me. I love the siege itself, the fight is great, but the repetitive nature of the relic weapons and just how long it took to get the weapons that you wanted sometimes left a sort of sour note at the end of it for me. When I stopped farming her months after she came out, I didn't want to fight her again. With time though, wounds heal and it allows us to forget the pain and remember all the goodness. Kulve Taroth as a monster isn't defined by how many times you had to fight her for her equipment, and she shouldn't be remembered by that either. She should be remembered as the creature who gave us the Caverns of El Dorado. One of the most gorgeous maps I have ever seen, as well as a truly epic fight that goes from a monster ignoring you, to the monster fighting you like you are tiny, to the monster finally treating you like an actual threat. I do also love that the objective of the siege was simply to break the horns, as she was just too powerful for us to kill. Almost like the implication is that all Kulve Taroth are Master Rank Kulve Taroth, but we just had to scale our damage up to be able to finally kill it now with Master Rank weaponry in the Master Rank quest. I have great memories of this monster and I love her concept and fight as well, so I totally agree with her being on this list.
Number 2 with 20.56% of the votes.
What's going on, baby girl?
Talking snails.
Actually, I'm a slug. No shell over here, baby.
Jhin and Gaoren Moran.
Jhin more and hallowed Jhin, because I miss the boat sieges, and the style of Jhin with 2 smaller horns in place of the larger horn from Durand I think is better. Plus a crystal monster in the moonlight was an incredible graphic back in 3.
Thank you, Timothy. These two have been collapsed into the same entry due to how incredibly similar their fights are. However, just so you know, if they were separate, they would be 3rd and 4th respectively, right behind Kulve Taroth. As an amalgamation, however, they're 2nd. The whole concept of the boat siege is super interesting to me. I love having interesting movement and combat changes for a specific quest, and the rush, that feeling of movement of being in a high-speed chase with a giant crystally sand slug is just super awesome to me. It feels like something out of a Star Wars movie or something, and I hope that we get more of these boat-type sieges in the future with updated mechanics and everything. It just seems like a really cool mix-up from the regular Monster Hunter quest style.
I voted for Jhin Moran. Most sieges are boring to grind over and over, and while that applies here too, I just really like his theme in the second phase. That's it.
What?
Number 1 with 50% of the votes.
Yeah, well, surprise, I'm not a baby anymore.
safi'jiiva.
The title of Best Siege Monster can only go to safi'jiiva for one reason alone. It's the only one of them that actually continues to feel like a fight after the initial spectacle runs its course. Most other sieges just feel like you and a bunch of other hunters poking at a wall with a toothpick until you come out the other side as soon as the honeymoon period is over, but this is diminished greatly with Safi.
This is, I would say that this is the correct choice, but you just obviously don't need me to point it out. Like, guys, 50%? 50% to the decimal. Like, that is some conclusive voting right here. safi'jiiva just isn't just the best siege monster. No, according to you guys, safi'jiiva is exactly as good as every other siege monster combined. Literally. But yeah, this is the most actually fighting a monster that you really do in a siege fight in these games. It doesn't even have siege weaponry as a part of the quest, and yet he is undeniably a siege fight. His arena is full of little tidbits and warnings of the danger before you, from the shed skin of his younger self to the just dozens of opened and destroyed Xeno'jiiva cocoons in the background. This fight is just terrifying from the ground up. The supernova, the sapphire of the Emperor, is easy enough to dodge, but still able to catch people out occasionally occasionally and is just an absolute spectacle to behold. And then the rest of the fight is just a good, genuine Monster Hunter fight. Nothing particularly bullshit or silly, just a focus on breaking parts and killing, which is nice. Again, not that I will remember a monster less fondly for their equipment system. I will, however, remember a monster more fondly if I liked their equipment system, and safi'jiiva is the perfect example of this. His armor and weapons shifted the entirety of the game's meta completely, making fantastical new things possible that never were before, literally allowing you to mix set bonuses that previously could not be mixed. And the outcome of this was a whole playground of builds. I made so many unique and fun and memorable builds that will stick with me in my memory for so much time, for the rest of my time with Monster Hunter, and they were only made possible by the existence of this creature, and I can't help but give him a little bit of a bump up in my rankings as a result.
I do have a strong opinion.
And that just about covers the list itself, ladies and gentlemen. So now it's time for everyone's favorite database to non-database discussion, a little graphical analysis. And I actually do really mean a little, as there were very few entries on this list. As mentioned earlier, safi'jiiva took up precisely 50% of the votes. Like, no kidding, no rounding, exactly 50%. This is incredibly unlikely, and I'm actually super impressed that you guys accidentally managed to do that. Past this, it's worth noting that some of you guys clearly have some sort of anger towards Zora Magdaros, and I get it, we all do. The fight was unquestionably a bit stale. Even when the arch-tempered version gave us a tighter timer and made you have to work harder, it was still not all that entertaining to actually do. But the important thing here is what they were going for. Zora Magdaros is like the idea of a boat siege where the monster is the boat, and the concept and lore of the fight and the implications on the world around it are all amazing, as is the concept of Zora himself. So, who knows, maybe one day in the future we will have a mechanically different version of Zora Magdaros who everyone feels way different about. Only time can tell, I suppose. Alright everyone, I've been Cotton Dinosaur, and this has been your list of the official top 5 siege monsters in all of Monster Hunter. Do you agree with the majority on this one? What list do you think we should do in this style next? Like if you liked the video, subscribe and hit the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet. This is the brand new outro to tell you all the things that you do that we love, so let's start with something simple and say, oh, we love your eyes. When they're watching us play video games, we make a bunch of jokes that are kinda lame, or when they gaze upon our failures as we try to kill the monsters or important news about the kingdom Animalia. Rage, Content, and Hollow are all here, talking about the things you want to hear, so if you want to be the first to hear, like and subscribe and the bell and we'll cheer. Some of you are patrons, even though we are all the noobs and you're the pros. There's nothing we can do to thank you. No, really, there's nothing we could possibly do. Goodbye.